Recently, I got a rather sad comment from a newer player, and I definitely empathize with like the new player position and some of the unique issues that new players face in getting themselves up to snuff in this game and the first couple months of the keeping up with the Joneses feeling. So the thing that I wasn't thinking about though is that especially with tier lists, especially recent tier lists of the best units in the game, they're really dominated by limited units. And if you don't have a 2 year catalog of limited units for your element, it can be really hard to know who to build outside of that, who to focus on, who to emphasize, and what units are actually good in the limited pool. Because at this point, there's a lot of outdated stuff in the limited pool, and there's a lot of older stuff that's actually been updated nicely. So, cumulatively, what are the best units that players starting maybe a month or so ago with around strategist Old Doa and moving into Advent Children and things that are being released after Advent Children like Gilgamesh and Veritas of the Flames? What is the tier list of characters that a player starting at that time around Advent Children could have in their arsenal? Let's start with the top tier. Saving for One Wing Sephiroth is definitely a valid way to get into the game. I think he's probably the most universal and flexible out of all the units that you could possibly have in the highest tier, so he's definitely my favorite. Ashen Mont, if you pulled him, is also incredibly powerful. There are other characters that can kind of fill in his place. In fact, I think Tifa actually reminds me of a limited, restrained version of him quite a bit as well. So if you can't get this character, it's no big deal. But if you did come in just a little bit ago and got Ashen Mont as the hype character, he's definitely very good and will have a lot of cool things to play with. June the Spring Celestial seems like a limited character, but she's not. She is in the limited pool, and she is currently the very strongest thing in it by a wide margin. Gilgamesh is going to be added to that pool himself, and while I'm not sure at this moment if he matches up to Joom or Mont or even Sephiroth, he is definitely going to be quite powerful and definitely worth inclusion in the top tier. And then finally, if any fans came in just to get themselves Advent Children's Coolest of Clouds, well, he's definitely a top tier unit too, and while he is maybe not as universal as Sephiroth the One-Winged Angel, he has a very strong synergy with the one good non-limited unit in the game right now, June the Spring Celestial. So if you do start with Cloud, there is a high chance, well, maybe not a high chance, but there is a good chance that in your pulls in the future, you're going to pull a pretty perfect partner for him in her, in that they're both anti-magic units and they both work with great sword vision cards. So really match made in heaven there. Seventh heaven, you could say. Moving down into the second tier, we have Strategist Oldoa. She's just a really good tank. I think more people actually potentially use Summer Glaciella, but Strategist Oldoa is actually better, and as a more recent limited unit, there's definitely more of a chance that you would have her, as she is the most recent tank that has a physical aura, and that can be pretty important. Helena the Black Rose, I think, is one of the most recent non-limited units other than Joom, so she's also one of the most powerful. She has sleep and ways to break people's resistances in large AoEs, very big AoE attacker. She can also heal herself and allies and put a reflect barrier on herself, a lot of things like that. The chance to sleep on her can be a real curveball, and that alone can turn matches around that she shouldn't have won. Soul is a little bit of the opposite. He's a corrosive fire mage that destroys everything in his path. He can build up allies to specifically strike resistance as good anti-physical unit in the ways that Helena's an anti-magical unit, perhaps. But both of them have pretty good resistances themselves and are pretty brawly and are definitely powerful mages. And in fact, both of them work pretty well together, even though I rarely see people using them. Kadaj is not quite as powerful as either of the mainline releases for Sephiroth or Cloud, but he is quite capable. If you do end up getting this guy, he's not bad at all. He's a little bit more of a defensively spec'd unit, a little bit more universal, so he's going to match up well against a number of things. probably better suited for katana teams than anything, as that plays into his flexibility the most, and I think really flexes his potential the most. But also a more strategic character. He's not a blunt force weapon, and he kind of falls into B tier because of it. Or A, B, C, D, E, S, A, B, A tier. Falls into A tier because of it. Alaya the Alabaster was, at her time, one of the most broken units in the game. She can give herself and others re-raise removal on hit for like 3 turns, and she has a skill that when she's in the middle of the map, she can hit anyone on the field with it, basically, in 3 different directions if she wants to. Since PvP is 3-on-3, this means she hits everyone on their team, most likely, pretty consistently, which means that also she kind of inherently ignores hate, which is pretty broken, and also that skill reduces CT, so she's a wombo combo machine too, and has a really smart counter. So all of that makes her very powerful, but like they have very smartly not upgraded her for a long time, and she doesn't need it. She's still an A tier unit despite. Veritas of the Winds, despite the fact that he hasn't got like a signature weapon yet, which we're starting to see with Veritas of the Waters, is probably the strongest of the Veritas, as he is the first release, and he is the one that has been, again, for the most part, upgraded the most. And people have had the most time to build him out, and maybe the most ease in building him out in some cases. Winged Stern pairs well with Ashen Mont or Cloud, and, kind of, in some ways, Gilgamesh as well, I guess. No, not so much. But he's a pretty good all-around unit. He's from a little bit earlier in the game than most of the units in A tier. He's one of the older ones, but he was also maybe one of the best of his era. It's also to his credit that he has such good partners like Cloud, Helena, and Ashen Mont to work with, so that's definitely helping him stay in the A tier instead of where he probably belongs, more in the B tier. Tifa is like a strike version of June the Spring Celestial in a lot of ways. Not necessarily as offensively overwhelming, but she does a lot of the same things and is still quite a powerful unit. She also reminds me of Ashen Mont in a number of ways. She's kind of like a hybrid between the two, but with the power level cranked down just a little bit, which is fair for a free unit. Definitely a good way to get a powerful unit quickly if you aren't looking to play into the lotto system and try to gotcha someone, or don't feel like you can pity someone, then she's definitely a good way to have a modern unit. Veritas of the Waters, people are 140ing her now, people are getting close to max reincarnating her now, if not max reincarnating her if you've really been playing Arena. But it's easy to get like 695 of her medals per week, even as a relatively new player if you play well in Arena. So you could build her up in a relative amount of time. She's a really good support and also has a damage dealer streak, so she can kind of shift from building your team up, breaking the opponents down, to attacking and kind of doing both of those things. So she's a really interesting unit in that respect, and also works really well with Kadaj and has a lot of elemental resistances that can make her feel like a more universal and more defensive unit as well. Elda, King of the Lions, is probably the best of the B tier units here. He's very accurate, very good against physical, and pretty good with some sustain and wombo comboiness for himself. His LB has some issues, but when it works really well. Sweetheart Ildira is one of the lower cost and maybe weaker units that's made it into B tier, but she has just enough evasion that on the right team, on fire, she can be a really powerful curveball that a lot of people can't deal with. She's not nearly as good at this as Yuffie is, but in terms of non-limited units, she's the best for fire, so good on her. She's definitely worthy of B tier. Dark Fina is an older black magic single target damage dealer. She can do a lot of damage, and with a lot of single target breakers and shred breakers out here, she might even be even more valuable now as a, if you got like Ashen Mont, Tifa, and her, she is your non-physical curveball, so they can't just physically tank you. If they try to do that, Dark Fina will wipe them out. Glaciella Flagbearer Reform has stayed the strongest wind unit and the strongest pierce unit since she came out, with the exception of Veritas of the Wind. She's just a little bit weaker than him. She has a lot more stuff in her kit. She's more of a can opener, as he is more of a blunt force weapon. Very, very powerful offensively. She is too, though, but in more, a little bit less damage and more technically so. And her upgrades have kept her relevant, but she's starting to fade a little bit as well. Omnilus can do damage in multiple directions the same way that Elia the Alabaster can. She's just not quite as stacked in how she does it. That being said, she can give herself guaranteed hit for multiple turns before doing this, so she could wipe evasion teams that don't have sure hit avoidance pretty easily at this point, and that makes her one of the best anti-evasion units on this team other than Elda, so a lot of that power is in water at the moment. And there are a lot of people who really face up against evasion well. So this could be a really powerful team itself, just these two. But they're also pretty good in their own respect. Melanie is probably the strongest range unit in the game. She's a little bit underused by global players, but she's a lot more favored in JP, where she was released relatively sooner. We felt like she got skipped and left behind, and not many people play her, but she is still one of the strongest Earth units. And second Earth unit to rank on this list, actually. Third Earth unit to rank on this list is Veritas of the Earth. Although this is kind of theoretical, he is still missing some parts of his kit that the other two Veritas that we mentioned so far have. He will be getting that in the future, and not a lot of people have really been able to build him. I don't even know if people have 99'd him yet, so nobody's really flexing this power, but he will be getting more powerful in the future. And looking at his kit, he's certainly worthy of B tier or higher. He might even hit A or even S tier, potentially. But I think A is probably where he's going to be. Hio's probably doing the best he ever has, at least as a non-limited unit when you take away the Astrius, the Erudite Bolt, or A2 from your Greatsword options. He becomes one of the best Greatsword units that you could possibly have. So definitely very powerful in combination with Doom and Cloud if you were hurting for those limited options that new players just don't have access to. Moving down to C tier, we have Volke. He's pretty good all around as a magically based spear who can tank physically based damage. Not a bad character. A lot of resilience here, but not a ton of damage. He's pretty good. Howlet, Jaden the Celebrated, and Reagan I all want to take together. They kind of go on a spectrum between being a brawler, like Reagan is, to being like Jaden, to where you definitely do damage, but you're more of a supportive character, to being just kind of an all-out damage dealer like Howlet. They're all released around the same time as each other. They're all ice dudes, and they're a pretty solid team together. They cover base as well. They're all pretty hard to take off the board, at least in the right scenarios, but they're kind of interchangeable and all around the same power level, I think. Sottily is so powerful. He's getting a limit burst upgrade that's going to make his best skill even more devastating. That ability to charm from him can really turn the fight around, and he has a lot of wide-ranging supportive effects that can turn the tempo of battle too. Never count a team with Sottily down. They still have tricks up their sleeve, even against steep odds. I've seen them pull things out of their ass at times. Ruinstern is one of the oldest units that we're going to talk about on this list. He is still a bit of a glass cannon, but he stays on the field better than he used to, and he has still the ability to take your opponent's entire team and not only do a lot of damage to them, but decimate their ability to recover or to resist future damage. He's very powerful in that respect. Original Elia was, at the time she came out, the strongest ranged unit in the game. She was overshadowed eventually by Melnia, but she's still pretty good. So if you want to really try ranged strategies, she's going to be one of your backbone characters in Ice. Shalza is a 70 cost support unit that can give characters courage, but also she can full life. So it's a really good supportive package for her. And she's one of the only supports in the game right now that really gets played and gets played effectively and is on some really big and important teams. Great combination with Soul. Also really good combination with Sephiroth and a lot of other teams that are going to support Fire. But I've also seen her, just virtue of being such a great support, work really well on teams outside of that archetype as well. Then moving into D tier, we have Varush. Varush is one of the only healers you're going to find for Katana. He's a magically based Katana unit, but his main job is more brawlery. So he's not a bad unit. He reminds me of Sylvie, but non-limited and a little bit blah. Definitely an overlooked 90 cost older unit, but I think he's definitely getting more potential to shine with Katana teams. So if you're trying to build a non-limited Katana team, or maybe a Katana team around Sephiroth, the One-Winged Angel, he's a great way to go. He also, I believe, has full life himself, so some of the same things that I would say positively about Shalza apply to him too. Bronwell is a newer greatsword unit. She's 70 cost, so her kit is restrained. I wouldn't recommend her as highly as Hio for that reason, but especially in limited cost stuff, the fact that she works well with Cloud and Doom the Spring Celestial is just a really good benefit for her. Lil Leela the Bold is a brawler. She is fairly close range in a lot of cases, and a little bit more, she has some AoE and single target, so she has flexibility in her attack types, and she's also quite an accurate unit, or at least she was when she came out. Though I would say that she has the drawback of being a dagger unit. She's the only dagger unit we're going to talk about on this list, so not really strong synergies for her, but she works well enough on Dark. Eliza's bow unit has some of the same job issues as we just talked about with Dagger, and she was the strongest missile unit before Alaya came into the game, so again, one tier below her. I really think that Lastwell could be a great combination with the way that his kit has been upgraded with Tifa, because he has a select multiple single target skill that breaks ice resistance before dealing damage, and she can shred single target resistance, so those two can stack together and have a really strong single target damage team between the two of them. And I think they have a lot of potential to just wipe people a lot faster than they expect. So I think Lastwell could have an opportunity to shine with a strategy like that. Uriel and Kamral are both lower costed Martialist units. Martialist is very powerful brawler type, kind of modernized version of like Pugilist or Monk, very strong strike archetype. And both of these have Fatal Oath. Kamral actually upgrades it in his kit, and this is going to bestow courage removal to themselves and allies in the same way that Alaya the Alabaster does with re-raise removal. This is incredibly powerful, and if it were not for these both being relatively restrained units and lower costed units, I would actually definitely have to rank them higher because of this and other factors. But as it stands, D tier. And again, D tier isn't bad. I would still use a lot of these units. It's just there's going to be a lot of other non-limited characters that are theoretically in E tier that just didn't make this list. King Mont's the third oldest unit on here. I forgot about Lastwell and Runestern are older. But he's a passable tank. He has good sustain, not really good damage, but he can hang in there, and he can keep the rest of your team functioning in a lot of ways. So he's a very serviceable tank, and I still see him to this day often on fire, and I still find him difficult to beat sometimes. Resnick is definitely showing her age too, but she is a very powerful support. Her LB can power up most stats, as well as providing a very large instant healing effect. She can use this multiple times as well, which is a really great boon for her. And that just makes her a great and powerful support that can turn the tide of battle for you. She doesn't do a lot outside of that, so she's kind of unexciting in the D tier. And then we have Veritas of the Flames. This is the newest Veritas. It looks like he's going to be able to resist damage, physical damage especially, pretty well. He looks like he has a lot of kit that is going to protect him from slash and in some cases strike damage specifically. And it also looks like he's going to be able to be a little bit tank bustery and really break into people and do a lot of damage. So, specific resistances on offense, very much an offensive powerhouse on other ways. But he doesn't have an LB yet. He doesn't even go past 120. So, we'll have to see what his future holds. But for now, might as well put him in D tier because he's definitely worth mentioning, even though he's brand new and people probably are going to be able to build him for months on JP. So, if you were a free-to-play YouTuber, hit that like and subscribe. Also, drop a comment down in the comments. Tell me which of these characters you've pulled, what you're planning to build with. Ask me and the other commenters and players in the comments questions about, hey, I have X and X. Who else should go with them? What vision cards do I need? Espers, questions like that, leave them in the comments. But I really hope that this video helps newer players that are wondering, like, okay, but who is actually good in the normal pool? Because hopefully this question answers that video. Whatever. Words are words. Word. And with all that being said, I'll see you in the next one.